We are on the road, driven by your Texas Ford dealers, along with Will Johnson. I'm Andrew Monaco, and Ford has driven us to Davis-Wade Stadium. We are in Starkville on the campus of Mississippi State University. After the bye week for Texas A&M, they'll take on the Bulldogs, the 16th ranked Aggies, taking on Mississippi State. Will, this is such an intriguing matchup between these two schools.
It is. I really think it's high-stakes football tomorrow night. You can set yourself up for November if you're A&M, and it's really twofold. In my mind, you mentioned ranked 16th. That's in the AP poll. Well, the playoff poll is going to come out on Tuesday. I think if A&M wins this game, they're going to push the top 10 in that playoff poll. You can't really dock them for the two losses, Clemson and Alabama this year, and I don't think the selection committee will. So what does that mean? New Year's Six implications, bowl game types. There's going to be slots available in the Peach Bowl, the Fiesta Bowl, Sugar Bowl possibly if you get that high. I mean, New Year's Six implications still out there for the Aggies if they win heading into November. More importantly, you win tomorrow, you're 4-1 in the SEC West. Tied for second with LSU. We all know who plays next week. Now, the Aggies do against Auburn, but there's an LSU-Alabama matchup out there too. If A&M wins, we could go into next week with a real three-horse race for the West title, the Aggies, LSU, and Alabama, and things are really going to unfold that first weekend in November.
I think another intriguing storyline is how do the Aggies finish a season? We've talked about it from camp. We've talked about it during the first month of this season. Now after the bye weekend, from what all the players were saying, well, there's a focus that they have.
Here's your chance to prove it, to finish. And I think what Jimbo Fisher talks about is finish every day. Make finishing a habit. If you finished in spring ball, each rep, each practice, when the coaches couldn't watch you in summer, every time you went out for 7-on-7, if you went all out all the time, weights, August camp, if you finish every day, it becomes a habit, and you can finish in the final month of the season. I think Jimbo Fisher has preached that for a very long time since his hiring. The Aggies' chance to prove it begins coming off this bye week.
That becomes the long view for the Aggies. As we also know that Jimbo preaches, what's next up? You got to be in the moment, and in the moment is a Mississippi State team whose offense may be struggling, but the defense keeps the Bulldogs in every single game.
Yeah, and for the Aggies, if you look at both sides of it, first Mississippi State on offense, they're struggling throwing the football. Nick Fitzgerald can still run it around. He's done it twice on A&M. He went for 182 on the Aggies the last time they were on this field, and really brings up a sick moment for me. I mean, first snap from scrimmage, 2016, the Aggies are the number 4 team in the country in the playoff poll when they came here. Nick Fitzgerald goes 74 yards right into this end zone behind us, and the Aggie season derailed from that moment on. He went for 182 that day. A little more modest the last time the Aggies and Bulldogs played last year, 105. But this is a quarterback rushing the football like that on you. He can't hit the century mark tomorrow night.
No.
You got to keep him contained. I think if you contain Nick Fitzgerald, you contain the offense, because we do know they've had some struggles throwing the ball. But also remember this, Andrew, Donovan Wilson's not going to play in the first half.
Right.
And go back to Kentucky. They were similar. They could run the ball on you. Terry Wilson could get around with his legs. They didn't throw it that well. How many times did we see Donovan Wilson make a tackle on Terry Wilson that was huge, and it kept Kentucky's offense as a whole down throughout the night? Larry Pryor, Keldrick Carper, maybe it's a Buddy Johnson in an extended role at the rover position. Somebody better account for Nick Fitzgerald while Donovan Wilson is not in the game, or it could be trouble again against that quarterback.
Does it help A&M that they faced quarterbacks like that they've had to contain and had success against them?
I would think so. This is a different defensive front for the Aggies, isn't it?
It sure
I mean, they have been able to knock down quarterbacks all season long, and we said it earlier in the year. It's not necessarily always the sack, but they have kept them contained. They have not allowed the big play, and that front just gets it done in the trenches, and they have kept running quarterbacks down this year. This is their best shot at doing it against Nick Fitzgerald. He's won the battle rushing. Fitzgerald the last 2 times. Very possibly could be advantage A&M tomorrow night when we're leaving here as far as holding him down, rushing the football with that defensive front.
Going to hear so much about Sweat, Montez Sweat, Simmons on that front line, and that disruptive defensive line of Mississippi State. Terrific. 12 sacks on that defensive line. Flip it, what you were talking about. That Aggie defensive line, 13.5 sacks just from their 4 starters. Everybody on that defensive line contributes. That helps the entire defense, doesn't it?
And it's a trenches game with Sweat and Simmons, like you mentioned, for Mississippi State. The Aggies up front, all of them. This is going to be a trenches game. A&M offensively, their line has to keep Sweat and Simmons out of the backfield, huge key. And then A&M's got to get into the backfield. I know that's something you'll pinpoint on the broadcast pretty much. You got to win in the opposing backfield tomorrow, and it just feels like one of those SEC West defensive struggles. I don't see a 35-31 score tomorrow night. No. I think it's going to be lower scoring. Who makes the big plays late will definitely matter. It just feels like one of those SEC West 21-17 type games to me.
The balance of A&M's offense. You were talking about Mississippi State and Nick Fitzgerald being able to run very good rushing offense, but does the balance of A&M counteract that Mississippi State really hasn't been able to throw the ball? Can the Aggies keep them struggling through the air?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
I mean, especially with what the defensive front is doing lately. And the Aggies are good in the secondary for the most part. It's just it's so hard to play in the secondary. Now, our partner, Dave Elmendorf, will tell you that. Yeah, he doesn't know how you play in the secondary anymore. But it's almost like if you play in the secondary, the short-term memory is more important than ever because you're going to allow a big play every now and then. It's just you have such a chance tomorrow night to hold this offensive down if they continue to struggle throwing the football. And you do what you have been doing against the rush, and particularly if you hold down Nick Fitzgerald, the opportunity for victory is right there in front of you, and then it falls on the balance of the A&M offense.
Yes, it does.
And I think the Aggies, as long as they keep Sweat and Simmons out of the Aggie backfield, they got a chance to move the football enough to win the game. I don't think anybody's going up and down the field tomorrow night, but the Aggies have the chance to move it a little more and enough to win the game.
This is going to be a fun one. Join us 5 o'clock on the Aggie Radio Network. That's when our pregame will start, 6 o'clock for the kickoff. Join Will Johnson, Dave Elmendorf, and me. This has been On the Road, driven by your Texas Ford dealers, Texas A&M, the 16th ranked Aggies, and Mississippi State. Thanks for joining us.